Chapter 13. Mountain Lion. When Jean saw her sister dash into the woods, she instantly raced after her. Jean could not see the sheepdog Eleanor, but apparently Louise did. The chase among the trees was a rough one. Roots, vines, and up-jutting stones impeded the girls' progress time and again. They turned their ankles as they stepped into unseen holes. But both of them kept on running, hoping each second to spot the missing German shepherd dog. Suddenly, Eleanor stopped in her tracks. First Louise, then Jean caught up to her. There was not a sound from any animal in the woods, though they listened intently for several seconds. "What made the noise Eleanor heard?" Louise asked her sister finally. "For a while I thought we'd find Baron, maybe being cowed by some large animal." "I had my doubts," said Jean. "Baron isn't the kind of dog who'd run away. He'd stand his ground and fight." "You're right," Louise agreed. "But—" She paused and pointed. "Look," Louise whispered, gazing straight ahead of her. A man was furtively and hurriedly slipping off among the trees. Eleanor made no move to go after him, and this puzzled the Danas. If the man was what the dog was after, why was she no longer interested? "Maybe he was trying to steal a sheep," Louise said. "Anyway, if Eleanor was chasing him, she may think he is far enough away by now and doesn't intend any harm." The girls scrutinized the area, but detected no further sign of the stranger's presence. Finally, the Danas turned and slowly started back toward the spot where they had entered the woods. "That man," said Louise, "surely acted suspiciously. Do you suppose he has something to do with Baron's disappearance?" "It's possible," Jean said. Eleanor was trotting on, keeping a short distance in front of the girls. Whenever she went through an especially tangled part of the woods, the girls would try to skirt the area. At once she would bound after them and bark furiously, as if telling them they were not going in the right direction. Smiling, the Danas would take the cue. "Much more of this and our clothes will be torn to shreds," Jean complained. "Better that than to be lost," Louise said. "We mustn't keep Mr. Strong waiting. And besides, we're on our way to Lost Lake, remember?" Jean grinned. "How could I forget?" The girls had just come to a particularly dense section of the woods when Eleanor suddenly stopped, looked up, then began to growl and bark furiously. "Now what does she see?" Jean asked, glancing upward also. The next second terror seized her, and Louise as well. A large mountain lion was crouched on a tree limb directly ahead, ready to spring down upon them. The big cat was spitting and snarling. The sisters were defenseless, with no weapon of any kind. They were almost hypnotized, expecting the deadly onslaught at any moment. The lion hesitated, however, apparently because of the furiously barking dog, who now seemed like anything but the friendly animal the Danas knew. Eleanor was wild, and her eyes blazed as she jumped around. Suddenly, Louise realized that the dog was holding the big cat at bay in order to give the girls time to make a getaway. She quickly told Jean this and said, "Let's run!" Jean needed no urging. "Just the same, I feel like a heel leaving Eleanor. She may be attacked herself. Oh, I wish I could do something to help her." "We'll get Mr. Strong," Louise suggested, and doubled her pace. The girls fairly flew out of the woods and almost ran full tilt into the rancher, who had sensed trouble. Quickly they explained that Eleanor's life was in danger from the mountain lion. Rifle in hand, Mr. Strong ran off among the trees, following the direction from which the barking came. Louise and Jean stood stock still, their eyes closed to shut out the picture of the tragic scene which might be taking place. Could Mr. Strong reach Eleanor in time to save the faithful sheepdog? A minute later, they heard a shot ring out. Jean said in a quivering voice, "I guess Mr. Strong got the mountain lion, but I hope Eleanor is all right." Louise was too worried even to answer. She simply stared until she saw Mr. Strong come crashing through the underbrush. A second later, the girls' hearts leaped with joy. Eleanor ran from the woods unharmed. "What a heroine you are!" Louise cried, and leaned down to hug the brave sheepdog. "You saved our lives." Mr. Strong, too, was a bit unnerved by the close call the Danas had had, and said that if any harm had come to them, he never would be able to forgive himself. "I should have followed you," he declared, "since I know there are mountain lions around." "Please, it's not your fault," Louise assured him. "Jean and I rushed off so quickly, you didn't have time to warn us." "Did you get the mountain lion?" she asked. "Yes, he'll never bother any sheep again." The rancher's good humor returned. "I should have brought the skin back so one of you could have a trophy to show your friends back home." "No thanks," Jean said quickly. "It would be too much of a reminder of the scare we've just had." "Scare or no scare, I'm hungry," Mr. Strong announced. "How about having our lunch now before we go on?" As they ate, Louise and Jean told him about the man they had seen in the woods. The rancher frowned. "Trying to steal a lamb, no doubt," he said. "That is one reason we have Eleanor. She's a marvel at spotting rustlers, human or animal." Despite his theory, the girls could not help but wonder if the man they had glimpsed could have been Sam Reinhardt, Ben Hopley, or Chet Simpson. So far, these people had been unaccounted for since their disappearances. The mysterious man might have been a spy rather than a rustler. "You're finding our country mysterious, dangerous, and rather wild," Mr. Strong remarked to the Danas. "If you want to discontinue our ride to Lost Lake, just say so and we'll go back to the ranch." "We wouldn't dream of such a thing," Louise declared stoutly. "It gives me the shivers to think of what may have happened to Barron, but if it's possible to find out where he is, dead or alive, I'll feel better." "Yes," said Jean, "and I haven't given up hope that he's all right." As the three searchers mounted their horses, Eleanor stood nearby. She whined and wagged her tail as if begging to go. "Can't we take her along?" Louise asked. "After doing such a good deed, she ought to have some fun." The rancher smiled. "Eleanor is a working dog. Her place is here. You've already seen first-hand evidence of how valuable she is. Eleanor will have her fun some other time." There was little conversation as the riders moved beyond the bounds of the Strong Ranch and set off in a direct line for Lost Lake. The scenery was similar to what the girls had seen on their other trip, though more rugged. Traveling became difficult, and they made rather slow progress, but continued riding for several hours without a halt. Finally, Mr. Strong called, "A few miles ahead is a cave where we'll spend the night. It's sheltered and contains some interesting pictographs. They're very well preserved and different from the petroglyphs you saw. Some of these are humorous." Jean grinned. "Sounds like an interesting Indian motel." Just before the trio came to the cave area, Louise, who was in the lead, called back, "Somebody else has been here, and not long ago. There are horseshoe prints and those of a man's boots. He must have been leading his horse." Hearing this, Mr. Strong said he had better ride ahead of the girls. The Danas reined up and let him pass them. They had just entered a canyon, which was most picturesque, but the beauty of the place was secondary in the minds of the riders. All were worried about what they might meet ahead. The prints showed that the horse and the man had plodded straight along, but suddenly the marks turned sharp right. "They lead directly to the cave," Mr. Strong informed the girls. "You stay here while I go find out if anybody is around." The girls waited anxiously, with Louise watching Mr. Strong and Jean keeping an eye on the rocky bench above the cave. She could see nothing but the bare, out-jutting formation. The rancher called from inside, "No one here. Come on." The girls rode forward and dismounted. They hitched their horses and walked into the cave, which had such a large opening the light penetrated far back into it. "Ugh!" Jean grimaced upon seeing the floor, untidy and littered with fresh scraps of food to which bushy-tailed wood rats were helping themselves. "That man whose prints we were following was staying here," Louise said tensely, "and not long ago." She and Jean felt uneasy. Who was the stranger? Would he come back? Was he a friendly person, or one of the thieves they were still eager to catch? End of chapter 13.